Certainly going to Kansas City changed my perspective from the properties that our clients that we tried to finance first purchased. I didn't get a very good impression. But after going to Kansas City and actually finding out the areas where you could invest with a lot less risk, I was pleasantly surprised. And I'd just like to introduce Rob Boudreau, who looks after our clients now in Kansas City. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
Do it.
How's everybody doing? Get a little lunch? Thinking what I'm thinking?
A little lunch?
Nap time? So Kansas City, just to tell you a little bit about it, we are in Missouri. A lot of folks I've met throughout the last couple of weeks tend to think that we're home of Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. We are Kansas City, Missouri. Our city's actually very large, 2.1 million people. In my 35 years that I've lived there, I've watched it double. Approximately 820 kilometers in size, which is about 60 miles in radius. Our unemployment rates are extremely low in comparison to the national average. National average is at 8.3%, and we are at 7.3%. That's a huge number. The downtown Kansas City area that was on that video just underwent a complete revitalization and renovation, a lot of new and a lot of restoration of old. In fact, Forbes magazine ranked it one of the top downtown cities in America. It was also named one of the top 7 cities to restart after foreclosure. Obviously, the entire U.S. has been hit pretty hard, but because of the economic growth that Kansas City's been experiencing and the fact that we didn't overinflate, we've got a lot of folks moving to Kansas City as well as businesses because we are a tax-friendly state. Some of our major companies, Hallmark Cards, Crayola, if you guys have kids that color on the walls, Garmin, Dairy Farmers of America, YRC International, Russell Stover Candies, not to mention the big ones, Ford and GM. We have both of them just about 15 miles apart. The reason we're here today is to talk about high cash flow. We don't speculate a lot of appreciation in Kansas City because we've always been kind of a safe haven and stable place to invest, which has made it just for years it's been just a hot spot for investors. We don't have a lot of the newer houses if you guys have looked at some of my properties, and that is simply because the new properties, you're talking $130,000 is the average sales price in Kansas City. And the new ones are simply occupied by owner occupants. We did not have a lot of foreclosures. Again, we built by supply and demand. Builders weren't popping them up and crossing their fingers and hoping they sell. Awesome returns. If you want to flip the slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Our typical sales price is $55,000 to about $65,000. And what that is going to get you is a 3-bedroom, 1 to 2 bath home. These properties, and don't get me wrong, you're seeing a low number that you would not be able to go into town and just pick up that property. I've actually been a real estate agent in Kansas City for 15 years and have established quite a few relationships with the larger banks where before that property gets listed, they're usually contacting me to see if I'm interested in purchasing them or if I can sell them. So anyway, on a $55,000 house, we're talking on average an $800 monthly gross return, which is huge. If you want to, I should have used the clicker, sorry. These 3 companies are my companies, all LLCs, which is important in business. Same thing in investing. Property Express is my research and acquisition team. We typically spend 6 to 9 months acquiring our properties through different channels. Sometimes we get them a little faster, sometimes we don't. There's a lot of waiting, so we have to continually fill our pipeline. Total Property Resource is our revitalization team. I have 3 crews. I'm on one of those crews in my spare time. I actually go there and do a lot of the work myself just to make sure that things are done to my expectations. That's very important to me. somebody had mentioned making sure that it's done right the first time, so that right now I own the property and I'm not going to experience troubles and problems. And then when I sell that property, I don't want anybody to experience that either. So, IE Property Management is our property management team. We have 8 of us on staff, and we do everything from tenant screening, marketing, and leasing the property, as well as continuing to build that relationship with the tenant and hopefully have some longevity in there. In Kansas City, our average tenant typically stays in the property for 3 to 4 years.
Just on the tenancy, I know a lot of people have asked about the Section 8. Rob does a lot of work in that area. Can you explain how the Section 8 works in Kansas City?
Sure. I think a lot of people have sometimes a misconception that the house is Section 8, and it's not. It's the tenant with the voucher. Again, you have to screen each tenant as an individual. Just because they have that voucher and we know that it's kind of like gold because the government's paying for it, it really is important to screen the tenant as if they were just a normal paying customer. I'm not a huge fan of Section 8, and the reason why is because in any governmental program, the system can get abused. In Kansas City, they're pretty lax to give out those vouchers. I would rather have somebody that pays me from hard work than a free ride. So only about 20% of our tenants are Section 8 renters. Usually they're either single parents or disabled, and that's fine. I know that they're going to take care of the property, and they take some pride in ownership, keep it clean and tidy. I've seen other folks that just completely abuse the property because there's no real repercussion to them. They went into the property and had nothing, and they're going to leave and have nothing. So.
In terms of the, just so people understand, in terms of the repercussions, with Section 8, the government comes and does regular inspections, don't they, the property?
They do. They have annual inspections to make sure the property fits within their guidelines. That could be, very minute things. Sometimes they change the rules a little bit, and they want you to make some type of new repair. Most recently was a water tank had to be 18 inches off the floor. Not real expensive, and again, if you have a good tenant, it's certainly worth it. So the 3 areas that we focus in are Jackson County, Clay County, and Platte County. Jackson County, again, has an average sales price of about $130,000. These are not $130,000 properties, but it would take that to rebuild them in today's market. We typically focus in Jackson County about 20 miles south of the downtown area, so it's out in the suburbs, places that you and I could live comfortably and not have any type of problems like you may in the urban cores. I had an opportunity to meet some folks here today that actually own 3 properties in Kansas City, and it sounds like they're having a pretty good experience as far as the tenants and the rent coming in. But the problem that they've been having was with the property manager, just no communication. And that's great that the rent's coming in, but I think if you guys ever have a question, it's very important that you're able to reach that property manager. So with our company, we're available pretty much around the clock. If I don't answer my phone, I'm sleeping. So anyway, in Clay County, that average sales price actually jumps up to $160,000, and in Platte County, $220 to $240 on average. So there are other markets to invest in that have a higher price point. And just because the entry point is higher does not mean that you're going to yield a higher return as far as rent. It's pretty much across the board. You might be able to squeeze another $100 or $200 out of it a month, but you're really going to gain in capital appreciation in the 2 counties to the north there of Jackson. So just food for thought.
Rob, can you just explain, when we found Rob, we had some people in Australia bought in Kansas City in the inner areas. Can you just explain what's in those areas and maybe why people have to be a bit careful about investing in these cheaper properties, and what they're like?
Sure. Picture a bungalow-style home, usually 2 to 3 bedroom, quite a bit smaller, obviously built during World War I and slightly after. That was the beginning of Kansas City. These homes are old. And what happens when things get old? We toss them out and buy new, right? Anybody? So typically what happens is that became rental properties, and it was good for a time. But the properties are just too far gone now where it makes it really expensive to revitalize. And just because you may own that property and fix it up does not mean that your neighbors are. Those houses are becoming more and more vacant. On top of that, there were owner occupants in these urban core areas. Unfortunately, they really shouldn't have gotten a loan in the first place. They didn't have the income requirements that we would see as being typical. I've seen a lot of them that got into their house and never made their first mortgage payment, which is terrible. So needless to say, that is the type of home, the type of tenant that you're going to find there, may typically be unemployed, not on Section 8 or on Section 8. There's both. If they could afford to get out of there, they would. And there's some of them who just like to stay, but they're typically your low-class type of person who really has no regard for anybody. So it's not the greatest place to invest, in my opinion. So a few before and after pictures. This is a property that we did over Christmas. When I bought this property, this is how the bathroom looked. I don't think any tenant would want to move into that, let alone shower in it. So what I often have found is I spend too much money and too much time rehabbing my properties because I want to have a long-term tenant. It might sound crazy in the beginning to spend more, but in the end you spend less. So my typical rehab here, we gutted this completely down to the studs, including the floor. I mean, no floor. All new tile, 18-inch porcelain tub, sink, vanity, mirrors, lights, sheetrock. This property actually has all new electrical, all new PEX plumbing. I'm not sure if you guys have PEX here, but it's a very affordable but yet durable type of pipe. And occasionally we have to worry about that when we have very cold winters. Copper can burst. So again, we try to prevent any expense from occurring. Stephen obviously has the clicker, and
press the right-hand button on the bottom right-hand side.
There you go. So this is another property we did. This one was a little bit more in-depth as far as exterior facade. It's got double pane windows, single hump, roof, gutters. We call that wood lap siding. It is wood, and just to touch about that for a minute, I understand there's quite a bit of a termite problem up in Queensland where houses just fall down on themselves. We don't have that kind of termite problem in the States. We typically have, a little mud run. They get into a piece of board, you treat it, you cut it, put in a new piece, and you're done with it. So I think that's been a concern for a lot of you folks as far as, is this house built out of wood, and what's the difference between wood and brick? Well, nothing really. So the kitchen here, we try to add a little bit of class to it. Again, we want our tenants to take pride in ownership, even though they may not own the home. They're going to take much better care of it, and we're going to procure a better quality tenant. Same in the bath there. I mean, again, these are properties that we could live in. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have a pillow? All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any questions, Stephen, anything else?
So just one question. What's the capital growth been like over the last couple of years?
Probably since about 1996, 98. I'd say about 4% on average. Again, supply and demand, we've just kept a real even keel on things. We've continued to go up even through the hard times. In 09 is when we experienced our little bit of a dip, but we're actually seeing stronger appreciation rates than we've seen in the past decade. So again, with the job growth, I don't like to speculate, but I'd be inclined to say that we're going to see some serious booming going on in the next 3 to 5 years.
Excellent. Thanks,
All right.
Rob.
Thank you, guys.